I'm going to read you a couple of verses in Hebrews, if you want to turn there. Hebrews chapter 13. Chapter 13, we're going to begin in verse 5. Hebrews 13. Verse 5. Let your conversation, and by the word, that word means your lifestyle, how you live. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. We are embarking on a new year. And as we come to a new year, we experience a lot of emotions. Maybe joy, maybe sadness, expectancy. And believe it or not, one of them that we face is fear. Fear. Now, if I was not a Christian, my approach to a new year, I think, would be vastly different than my approach as being a Christian. That's just how I feel. We say, what's the difference? Well, the difference can be kind of zeroed down into this. It's all how you look at it. And in these two verses, there are four wonderful things. Lessons, reminders as to why we do not have to experience this emotion of fear as we go into a new year. Four incredible things the writer of Hebrews gives us. The first one is so foundational and it's so important. He says there is a contentment of His, our Lord. There is the contentment of His provision. In other words, there is the peace that He's going to give us what we need. And that's what provision is. Not necessarily what we want, but it's what we need. Let's focus on the word contentment. I think we need to think about it. What is contentment? In biblical terminology, what is contentment? Well, before I tell you what it is, I think we ought to look at what it isn't. Contentment is not getting what you want. Let me illustrate that for you. Without raising your hand, How many of us at some juncture, some point in our life, just knew there was something we wanted? We needed it. We even convinced ourselves of it. And some of us really get spiritual and we just search the Word of God and say, I don't see a thing in there that would be wrong with me having this. We want it. Could be a lot of things. Maybe a new car, new boat, new job. But we are thoroughly convinced that I will be happy if I get this. And then there's been times when we get it and we're not happy. We've all done it. All of us. We get it and we're not happy. It doesn't bring us contentment. So contentment is not getting everything we want. You know what contentment is? Real contentment is wanting what you already have. You see, that's where we get off base sometimes. We don't look at what God has given us. And we're nowhere near as grateful for what He has given us as we should be. We overlook it. Rather than focusing on the home we have or the car we have or the health we have or whatever, maybe even the job we have, focusing on it and saying, and I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong whatsoever with you looking to update yourself or do a little better. No, I'm not saying that. It all focuses around contentment. I think a lot of times we just need to stop and see what we have and what God has done for us and just be grateful with it. Be thankful for it. Great passage. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. Paul says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. I like this. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. You know the reason a lot of people are fearful? They're afraid that their needs are not going to be met. You'd be surprised how many people will look at 2013 and see a lot of the uncertainties out there and a lot of the worries that we're facing. And the first thing they think of is themselves. If you look at the state of our country and you're on a fixed income and you're drawing a Social Security check and you say, I am so afraid they're going to cut my Social Security. It makes us fearful. If you work for a company that's a small business and they're providing you health care, but you know they're struggling to pay for that, and they would fall into a category of the owner of that company could come and say, we can't provide you health care any longer. There's a potential for fear. Afraid that our needs are not going to be met. You know what Paul said? If we have clothes on our back, get this, I love this. If we have clothes on our back and food in our cabinets and Jesus in our heart, we ought to be, Phil would say, we ought to be happy, happy, happy. We should be. If we have those basic things. A roof over our head, clothes on our back, food in our cupboard, and Jesus in our heart. Contentment. So as we look at a new year, there's the contentment of the provision. Just remind yourself every now and then of who you belong to and be happy that He's going to provide for you. Second, there's the companionship of His presence. I spoke on this Wednesday night. I talked about a cliff in Bible study on Wednesday night, not the fiscal cliff. We already nailed that one. No, I talked about the cliff of a new year. Taking the plunge into a new year. And I told the people Wednesday night, I said, if we go off the cliff, there's that uncertainty. If we go off the cliff, if we are a child of God, then that means He's going with us. We're not going to go off by ourselves. Because He has promised us that He'll always be with us. Do you know what the Bible means when it says that God will never forsake you? You know what that means? It literally means that He will never abandon you. Never. You always have Him. He's always there. His presence, I talked about it Wednesday night. He is in you and you are in Him. What a blessing that is to know He's always there. Among the many things that Adrian used to say that I just love to hear, he said, when the devil comes and knocks at your heart's door, you need to just look up to heaven and say, Jesus, would you get that? I loved his wit. And the point he was making is this. He's that near. He's with us always. And so when Satan is troubling you and you feel his pressure, then just look up to heaven and say, Lord, would you get that when he knocks at the door? And He's promised that He will. He's that near. So there's the contentment of His provision. Be happy that He's going to provide whatever we need. There's the companionship of His presence. He's going to be with us even if we go off the cliff. We're not going off alone. And thirdly, there's the confidence of His promise. In the middle of verse 5, there's an important phrase that I want you to look at. The writer said, He hath said. He hath said. The focus on He. Folks, a promise is no better than the one who makes it. I could promise you. Someone else may promise you. Bobby, if some extremely wealthy person, someone who is very wealthy, very noteworthy, offered you $10,000 a month, it's yours, I promise you. And they had the resources to back that up. You could feel good in that. If I promised you $10,000 a month, don't go out and buy a new car. I couldn't come with that. A promise is only as good as the person who makes it. And the one who says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, is none other than the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent God of this universe. That's the confidence of His promise. Watch this. In the coming year, when you say and you feel, God, I just don't have the strength. I don't have the strength. The omnipotent, which means all-powerful, God will answer, I will never leave thee, and I'll never forsake thee. In the coming year, when you say, God, I'm afraid and I feel so alone, the omnipresent God of this universe says, I'll never leave thee. I'll never forsake thee. When you look to heaven and say, God, I don't know what to do. I am perplexed. I don't know what to do. The omniscient, which means He knows everything, the omniscient God of this universe will say to you, I will never leave thee and never forsake thee. There's the confidence of His promise. There is the contentment of His provision and the companionship of His presence. And then fourthly, there's the comfort of His protection. Now I want to take that little phrase again that I mentioned a moment ago in verse 6. He hath said, and I want to put that in front of the middle part of verse 6. And it reads like this. He hath said, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. Like I said earlier, and I talked at great length about it Wednesday night, there's not a one of us know what this year holds for us. Really, in reality, there's not any of us can say with absolute clarity that we'll even see a new year. Some of us may be gone. But if we make it to a new year, I challenged them Wednesday night. I said, if anybody in this auditorium can come up and guarantee me that they're going to be here when 2013 closes, I want you to do that. No one could do that. Life is that fragile. It's that uncertain. We can contract some physical ailment and be gone in no time. Then there's always the possibility of driving down the road and having an accident. We just don't know. And now we're being insinuated in the concept you never know where you're going to go. You can go in a fast food restaurant and somebody just decided, I want to see people die. Did you see the last guy that was involved? He said, I just wanted the guy that burned the houses down. Did you see what that note, part of that note he left? He said, I just wanted to burn the neighborhood down as much as I can and kill as many people. I wanted to do something I enjoy doing, killing as many people as I could. That was the mindset of this man. And you may think it's cruel of me, but I'm really more happy for the last murder he committed. He saved our country from having to deal with him. So you never know. You go into a fast food place, you go in, I used to aggravate John all the time because there was a rash of this. We'd go into the post office. You never know. Some of them were postal employees sometimes, but anyway, you never know. You just never know. That's how fragile our world is. But the great thing to know, the awesome thing to know, with all of the uncertainties and everything else, is that we can be reminded that the Lord is our helper. He is our helper. And it may be a crazy thing to do. A lot of the proponents of both sides of the gun control and everything now, those who believe in their amended right to bear arms, which I happen to believe in as well, but those who support that say we have an issue, we need to deal with it. But one of the crazy things we do is we put signs out in front of our public schools and say this is a gun-free facility, and it's just like, open up on us. Well, my home is a gun-free facility. I don't have one in the house. Not a one. Not because I'm against them. I've always been a little afraid of them. And if you have a fear of something, you really shouldn't. I don't think you should use them. So guns have always been a little fearful to me. So at 112 Hazelwood Hollow, there is a gun-free facility. Please don't think I'm some kind of macho guy or anything like that, because I'm not. But honestly, it has never bothered me. I know a lot of people who have permits. They call that go packing, don't they? I know a lot of people, good friends of mine, any given time, they've got a gun on them. Maybe because of what they do, what their job requires. They have a permit and they carry that gun. I'm not against that. That's up to that person. It's up to that person. But I think ultimately, our greatest security is not carrying a weapon. I think our greatest security is knowing that we have a relationship with the God of this universe. And here's my philosophy. If at some times in this coming year I get killed and you remember back and you think I was involved in some way as an innocent person and got killed, and you remember, I remember the preacher talking about that and said he didn't worry. You take it to the bank. I don't think we ought to do foolish things. We lock our doors. Like that's going to stop anybody if they want in. But anyway, we don't do foolish things. But I don't get so overworked and wrapped up and so paranoid about somebody coming in on me. It's not because of who I am, but it's because of whose I am. And folks, here's my philosophy. If it's my time to go, then I'll go. And listen, I'll go and be with Him. And I'll be far better off than any of you are. I promise you. Far better off. Because the Lord, He is my helper. As we approach a new year, as children of God, we feel so many advantages that the world doesn't have. Now let me say this. If I were not a Christian, and I had an ounce of common sense about me, by just looking around and seeing the condition of the world that I'm living in, if I were not a Christian, and knowing my tendencies, I could see myself being very paranoid and very fearful going into a new year. But the difference is I am a child of God. So I can go in or look at the prospect of going into 2013 and not be overly concerned. Because the one to whom I belong has promised that He's going to supply whatever I need. And I'm to be happy in that. He has afforded me so many wonderful promises. And He's always came through. And I can go into a new year and read some of those precious promises and not have to be afraid, not have to worry. So really, so much of this comes down to, are you a believer or are you not? So if you're overtaken in fear, perhaps it would be a good time to just look at your own life and your own heart. Has there ever been a point in your life that you remember that you bowed and you confessed your sin? And through the exercise of faith, you looked to Jesus Christ and His death on the cross and His resurrection from the grave. And you said, Lord, I believe You died for my sin. So I give my heart to You. If you've never done that, as we bow together, we're going to pray in just a moment. But just before we do, if you can't go to that time in your life when you did that, maybe that might have happened a long time ago for you. So long you might not even be absolutely sure how old you were, or I think it's hard to fathom not knowing where it happened, but you may not know exactly how old you were or what the year was. But you know in your heart that day you gave your life to the Lord and you felt forgiven. If you've never done that, would you just by an upraised hand, nobody's looking around? My reason is never to embarrass you. No. I sincerely would love to pray for you. I think that's a starting point. If you have never given your heart and life to the Lord Jesus Christ, you may be saying, Ronnie, I'd love to be able to look at a new year with the same attitude that you do, and a lot of other people you know. Would you just, by slipping up your hand and taking it back down, say, brother, would you remember me when you pray? Is there one anywhere? Anywhere? I trust and I pray that means everybody in the house has that peace in their heart. So, church, if you have that peace in your heart, look at 2013 and say, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to move right on. Not because of who I am, but because of whose I am, who I belong to. It makes all the difference. Let's stand, please. We're going to be dismissed in prayer. We will be having services tonight, 6 o'clock. I'm going to talk to you on a very, very touchy subject tonight. We're going to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness. The title of the message is The Freedom of Forgiveness. We're going to look forgiveness inside out and see what it is and how we can do it and how we will prosper when we do it. Now, if you don't have anything to do or you're looking for something to do and you don't have a wild party on Monday night, we'd love to invite you to come and be with us. We'll be at the Johnson City Baptist Temple. Ourselves and our tenor singers other group, the Crystal River Boys, and our piano players other group, the Singing Montgomerys. All three of us will be there at Johnson City Baptist Temple around 8 o'clock on Monday night, and we'll go all the way to 12. We've done this for the last 3 years. It's a great church. Wilkie Brookshire is the pastor there. He's great people. They feed us. It's a great time. The best way to tell you, if you don't already know where it is, it's out on the end of the Milligan Highway. But the best thing to do is just go to Johnson City and get off there where the Milligan Highway exit is, cross over the interstate, and the church is just no more than a quarter of a mile or so out there on the left. It's right on the highway. You won't have any trouble finding it. But if you'd like to come over and be with us, we'd love to have you. Let's bow.